let's knock off this AMA.
That sounds great. Would you like me to go ahead and kick it off there, Elise?
Yeah, let's do it. And you guys in the community, as everybody comes in, just raise your hand if you want to ask a live question. And we definitely encourage that. We're recording this and we're going to use it as content on social media. We want you guys to interview and come up with really great questions for our founders. It shows that they're invaluable in our community and keep this community really growing. And it shows the heart and soul of this project that they just really stop everything that they're doing and like literally meet our needs with education and everything. So, you know, we want you to be present and take advantage of that, you know, while we do these things. So with that going on, raise your hand, ask a question, and we will get things started. This week, we're going to go over 2 partnerships that we already announced because it just seems like in marketing and medium, we're like, boom, boom, boom. There's so much exciting news. It almost seems spammy, but there's actually nothing spammy about it. It's really like headlining news and like we're changing technology. And so we need to reiterate like some of the importance behind these partnerships, Space Isaac being one of them, and then IEE being the other one. And then we have some really fantastic news as well. And then you guys have the amazing Wyatt here who will spin our brains and have us thinking for the next 3 weeks again. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And I will let you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Elise, and everybody for joining, as well as the kindness and the gifts. That's very cool. I'm here joined with my co-founder and batch brother, Wyatt, and today we're going to mainline some technology. We're going to do it. So I've got the questions, Wyatt. I'm going to kind of act as the moderator here, and I'll ask you some questions, and we'll go back and forth. That said, I'm going to probably take the mic for the first I'd say at least 15-20% here to talk through some of the business questions that we got listed. Though if you at any point have any color you want to add, just interrupt and pipe in on my sections. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Sweet. All right. Well, the first question is, which value is your lodestar, also known as a North Star? Can you bring humanitarian anarchist principles to Kratos and Lockheed Martin? We're coming out with a pretty heavy one right from the get-go. And the reason I like this question is that it's got less to do with the technology and more to do with our personal ethos. And I'm not going to go too deep into it because I could talk about that stuff for a while. Though I will say I was just noodling with the team that I think it might be good for us to share a little bit more about who each of us are as founders, so you can learn more about our intentions and why we're doing this project in some separate videos. I personally would like to see, you know, while we are focused heavily on transformational technology, I'd like to see this humanized a little bit more so that you understand the intentions of why we're doing this. You know, the humanitarian anarchist principles. The reason why I like that question is that really kind of contains the paradox, which is where I do believe our company, I don't want to speak for the other founders, but I do know we all kind of have the same mantras. And we're not here to fight the fight and take over what Lockheed Martin is doing or try to take down the man. Coming from a group that is working with the federal space, that would seem kind of like an oxymoron. That said, we do see the importance of getting close to these institutions to institute change. And with that, we want to offer a technology that gives choice, that gives people the opportunity to freely use data as they see fit as a datapreneur. And we're going to be sharing more in 2021 what the makeup of a datapreneur really means and how that ties into our network. We can't share much about our engagements with Kratos and Lockheed Martin. To be candid, we haven't talked to Kratos yet, but we do have a strong working relationship with Lockheed. And as you can imagine, they keep their cards very close to their chest. That said, we're here to offer a technology that is, I don't want to say benign in nature, but in a certain way, it doesn't come with an agenda attached to it. I mean, Wyatt, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's really no agenda. I mean, to be totally honest, the only agenda really is that there's issues with, you know, how we send data over the internet.
Love it. Yep. So What is the relationship status of DAG and AWS Gov Platform Cloud One? So I'm going to table this one. You know, I've noticed that we've done presentations in the past where, you know, this wonderful forensic group of our community has noticed the logo of the AWS Gov Cloud partnership. That said, there's a lot to unpack with AWS, and Wyatt and I are working in lockstep right now to position this announcement with the AWS team. I will say that this week we had a very promising and solid call with the head of distributed ledger technology for AWS. And to put that in perspective, it took me 15 months to get to that call. And that's not about just getting on the phone and talking to them face to face and saying, hey, here's who I am, here's who you are, but having the right trust measures in place so that those that align the call fast tracked us to a level of validation so that we're now in a place of actually doing some really great stuff. That said, the reason why we haven't really announced this, the reason why we haven't announced this partnership yet is because we want to show some breadth and validation from their side and actually have the tactical underpinnings to show where the product is going to fit within their ecosystem. So all the places are there, and I apologize that I'm not going to add context around those just yet. So next question, and I'm going to give this one to you, Wyatt. Will Quant take part in the interoperability of the Lattice exchange?
I mean, there's no reason why not. We haven't spoken to them as of yet, but I mean, to be totally honest, maybe I'll just throw that in there when we're building the HGTP side of it. Great idea.
Yeah, it is a great idea. And we have talked to them in the sense of having a partnership on the Constellation side, but they haven't been brought into the fold on the Lattice side just yet. So, so there's that. Can the team speak more on the technology and what is required to adapt to be built out for different use cases to enable those seeking outsourcing options to adopt it and resurrect their own state channel product built out on DAG, and how those both parties can profit and grow together? That's kind of a little bit of a convoluted question, so no offense to whoever asked that one. I'm trying to understand a little bit better, but what is required to adapt and be built out in different use cases? And I know I've hammered this home a ton, and this is a lot of what Wyatt has done an awesome job on, which is our ability to deploy within existing data management ecosystems. And that's really what's going to help us win when it comes to scaling our solution. So I'm not going to go too deep in that because you folks already understand that. And I've started to touch a little bit on how parties can profit and grow together, because I will just say that one of the main hits on that is with Constellation being in place, we're enabling data to hit compliance levels that they currently can't hit, that allows them to channel into new books of business, whether that's migrating to cloud, whether it's passing data into systems that right now can't be passed because it doesn't hit the compliance measures. That's a big area in which we're going to help grow and benefit with some of those groups. Do you see where this could lead the world to almost viewing industries as new asset class of a commodities market? I think this is a great one for you, Wyatt. I'll repeat the question. Do you all see this could lead the world to almost viewing industries as a new asset class of commodities market?
Oh, wow. I mean, like, yeah, 100% yes. I mean, that is like exactly, yeah. I mean, yes. How would I put this? Industries is a new asset class of commodities. I think that there is a fundamental shift in, both finance and, just sort of how we govern ourselves and sort of, provide infrastructure for just everyday life by, understanding the financial component or sort of dimension of data, and especially individuals' data. And in the same way that commodification of certain industries in like the commodities market, like beans or rice or whatnot, became a fundamental facet of, just the modern economy. I don't really need to get into that. I think that, the data marketplace and the data economy is going to become like a whole new part of that existing space, but also, it has the potential to underwrite that entire, kind of space as well. So the commodification of actual user products, as opposed to just industries or specific commodities that are represented by an amalgamation of industrial output. So that's really what I'm seeing. And I kind of see this technology as an opportunity to use the base layer to actually provide, I guess you could say, what's it called in finance when you basically like meet trades inside of an order book or whatnot. But basically like to actually just add a second layer to the entire financial infrastructure that currently exists. Because you can do this in a much more native way than how traditional stock markets are built. So yeah, I'm happy to go into that in more detail. I'm actually writing a huge paper on it right now, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys probably in a couple of weeks.
Heck yeah. I've had early visibility on this paper and it's a real crowd pleaser. So I'm excited to see it get out there, buddy. Sweet. All right. So there's quite a few questions here around space ISAC. And so I'll do my best to answer those. One of the first ones is what's the relationship with the founding members such as SES, Kratos, KSAT, and so forth? Do we have business relationships with them in the broader space ecosystem? I will say we're early in the space ecosystem. We've only been in this space now for the last 3 or 4 months, and that took a lot of strategic decisioning on where we wanted to put our efforts into consortiums in the next year. And space, I can't say it enough, is like this open playing field right now, and that's very that has a lot of positives when you think of a kind of a capitalistic market share mindset. Great, if we get early, we're very sticky in some of the workflow of these systems and how they're changing infrastructure as we know it. But the bad side is those barrier to entries that are rather low right now offer a lot of opportunity for corruption, security breaches, and shenanigans, so hacking, if you will. And that's why a lot of people may sit there and make fun of Donald Trump for standing up the Space Force agency. I think it's the first agency in the DoD to be stood up since like the 60s or something like that. And everybody's like, oh, space, it's silly. But I don't think folks realize how many satellites are in space right now and the level of orchestration they have over us. And so when you think about these other partners, they all represent a different piece in the ecosystem. So we're not looking to try to be a competitor to any of them. In fact, we're the only base protocol that's part of Space ISAC, the only blockchain company that has their own network that's part of Space ISAC. So we're looking to add a capability to their workflow. Like SES, they're like a contracting group that goes out, ex-military, and helps deploy new solutions. So they see us as a capability to help either hit compliance levels or allow for notarization of data. Finding out where that data was originated is extremely important to each of these groups. So the nice thing, about these consortiums is that it's like a one-to-many. Once we get in, we now have this directory where I can ask the consortium lead, hey, can you line up a call with Kratos? And they'll say, yeah, we can do that next week. And next thing, we're on the phone because we have a joint energy around Space ISAC. One of the questions is, which role does Space ISAC play in JADC2? So JADC2, for those that haven't been following, is Joint All-Domain Command and Control, and really is the precipice focus for the DoD. So they may have initiatives around drones, around AI, around machine learning, all sorts of emerging technologies. But JADC2 is really the umbrella in which it all matters. And that really is predicated on bringing that information together in a hub and then pushing it back out. And as we all know, or at least should know at this point, sending that data to a central server and back is just not working anymore. So they're heavily exploring edge computing capabilities in which we fall into. And there's no better demonstration of edge computing than satellites. I mean, those things are in space. They're pretty far when it comes to the edge. I don't think we go any further from edge technology than satellites. So what role space plays in JADC2 is that's a data point, one of the major ones that will allow for orchestration to take place at the edge of really bringing forth the opportunity of interoperability amongst these different command and controls and domains. Which branch in the space economy has the most demand for Constellation's tech? Security. That's the answer to that one. I mean, making sure that the data is what it says it is from the notarization standpoint, and that it can't be opened or tampered with from anyone that that's not supposed to touch it. So those are my quick answers on that. And we're going to move over to a question for Wyatt. Ken. let's see here. Sorry, I have to read these. You mentioned the need to educate on the difference between blockchain and DAG technology. Should the Stardust community and community support the team in that effort with content, or no need since the marketing department is tackling that? Okay, that's more a question for me. No, we need as much help as possible. And it's, you know, really the difference between a blockchain and a DAG should be rather simple at this point to folks. And if not, maybe mark this down, and Wyatt, you can back me up on this. I'm trying to do it as simply as possible. Blockchain is linear. Every time a new transaction is created, it's a new block is added to the linear chain with directed acyclic graph. It as more, it's like a graph as in a net, and as more data comes on, the faster it becomes. And there's like a really great visual that we can send around of people trying to get on a bus and having to wait their turn to get in versus a bus having multiple doors. But while I'm meandering on this question, maybe you can just quickly do a quick recap on the difference between traditional blockchain and DAG.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that, Diggle. That was great. You know, I could say it in a few words. DAG technology is essentially just blockchain technology with a factor of parallelism. So like you can basically have multiple blockchains running at the same time, all providing useful work for each other. And the end result is a graph, which is, you know, represents the concurrent action as opposed to a linear structure, which represents the synchronous action of traditional blockchain protocols.
Awesome. Love it, buddy. Perfect. So, all right. While we got you, how difficult is it to create cross-chain bridge between DAG, ETH, and possibly other blockchains?
How difficult is it? You know, it's actually a great question. So like, it's great because I'm working on, you know, well, not necessarily like, you know, building or like, oh, sorry, what? Oh, sorry, I think someone's microphone is on. Yeah, so I've actually been focusing on this in like the day-to-day. I just had a huge planning meeting about this a couple hours ago, but yeah, so what does actually go into, or what actually goes into creating a state channel? From like a development perspective, actually creating your own state channel is as simple as creating your own HTTP server. The interface that we're creating is very similar to, you know, how you would use something called a future to represent API calls. And, you know, basically from that very similar interface, you'll be able to create, you know, just components and, well, one, like secure endpoints, and two, also components and like some type of like a data pipeline or microservice that, you know, you can run consensus on, or, you know, self-orchestrate automatically through, you know, consensus. And so that from like a developer standpoint is fairly straightforward, I would say. But the real nuance comes into figuring out how do you actually want to create, you know, how do you actually want to create and support your token? And by that, I mean, like, in order to actually create and solve the cross-chain liquidity problem, and that's one of the main, like, sorry, this like weird background thing is cutting me out. Sorry, in order to solve the cross-chain liquidity problem, there needs to be some type of shared unit of value that can be represented across all different ledgers. And so in order to actually solve that problem, one potential solution is to use entropy. And without getting into any of the specifics, there is a way that we can represent utility as like useful work being done by a network and have that backed by the actual like value of a token. And so that was sort of a long way of saying, creating a state channel isn't just creating like the HTTP server. You have to create something called an ACI, which is like Ethereum's ABI. And so this is essentially just like a JSON object that contains configuration for how the token mechanics of your state channel is going to work. And so I'll just add that there's a nuance such that, which I'm really proud of and I think is cool, which is that there's a potential to actually launch a state channel with some type of a, you know, relatively stabilized value of your state channel token that's backed by a notion of debt that can be repaid by just hosting DAG nodes. And so there's, just an extra component to how, people can actually get involved in, like the mining community, and also how they can get their products to market, as opposed to focusing on the fundraising factor, but more the proof of concept factor as well. And all that stuff's going to be released actually in this paper I'm working on. These components have well been, finalized. I'm just actually like getting the nuts and bolts ready because I want to get this thing published, kind of like the last blockchain cohomology paper, which is what the interface I was talking about, which HTTP comes from. So yeah, and also one other thing you can look forward to as well in understanding how this works is that I'm working on like an interactive web page that will help show how token mechanics change based upon tweaks and whatever inside of your configuration. So how much money goes into a liquidity pool in like some type of a fundraise or something in a traditional sense versus how much consensus processes you're hosting in your state channel to sort of pay for this sort of bridge to exist. So it's the equilibrium that comes and sort of forms a two-sided marketplace to help incentivize investors to find great projects to invest in and node operators to do a great job hosting the network.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. So another one for you. What is your strategy to onboard developers to get familiar and to start building on Hypergraph? Will there be any requirements to build on Hypergraph like Polkadot, where the board decides which projects to launch on the network?
No, not at all. I mean, fuck no. Fuck no. I didn't even know they were doing that. Fuck that.
I didn't either. Yeah, I agree.
Oh my God, we are so not doing that. We're finding ways for you to launch tokens without even fundraising, just by providing resources. Like, don't you even worry. Hell no. Sorry, really quickly, what was the question? I'm reading it again right now. So what's the plan to actually get folks to, try and adopt this stuff? So yeah, totally. I was actually talking about this in a meeting before. The first couple of years of Constellation was really actually focused on just proving out, this technology and building a proof of concept. We have mainnet. We know that this stuff works. And, that was an amazing accomplishment and achievement. And now the real focus is on how can we take this and actually, integrate this technology in a seamless way with all the other tools and technologies that we use when we're building, some type of a backend or some type of a blockchain product. And so, I just to add a little context, I think one thing that really made everything in like 2018 or like the whole Ethereum kind of fundraising movement and just the whole ecosystem was the potential to, or rather just the interest, the organic interest of individuals to actually just want to use this tech to build cool shit. I think sort of a complication arose in getting this technology approved from kind of like the enterprise level or like the boss level when you're working at a company. And so, when we're working on sort of deep technologies that, are often open source just due to, their academic nature, like a Spark or some big data technologies would actually made, this entire industry of what we call big data, where people who actually found it really interesting to massively parallelize operations using this new, method of programming. And so it was actually kind of like this grassroots movement of individuals finding new ways of solving, seemingly difficult problems in just a new, interesting, fun way. And so, our goal is to actually try to recreate that. And so we're launching a pretty hardcore, dev evangelism movement next year. I've actually been sort of getting everybody ready for that in the last couple of months, just showing some examples of different projects. I'm working with Frank Fox, who is phenomenal. Sort of putting that together, and also has a lot of experience, with community team building on the Ethereum side. So next year we have a big dev evangelism push, and the goal is to try and make it very simple to just launch simple, products, or just, like a little proof of concept of something you find interesting. We want it to be as simple as launching a Spark context or just deploying an Ethereum smart contract. And what you're actually getting is your own, custom base layer technology with cross-chain liquidity capabilities.
Love it. Yeah, I'm going to add on to that just real quick that Constellation is an infrastructure company and we're not in the business of deploying projects internally. to Wyatt's point, our goal here is to offer anybody can build, whatever they'd like. Of course, that's appropriate on top of Hypergraph. That said, right now we have a lot of inbound projects coming to us saying, hey, we want this validated and whatnot. And we're using those as early ways to build out the appropriate playbook so that anybody can just grab and go. That said, I'm sure we'll probably structure some way to get to the core team to work on a project through some sort of a finance thing. Hey, you want to pay us for us to focus on this? Great. Otherwise, take the kind of self-serve stuff and go for it, and go forth in profit. So that's the goal. And again, a big shout out to Wyatt. That's a big difference between our project, is that it's making it as easy as possible and baking in as much of the function into the protocol so that you can just utilize the capabilities without spending your time working on building it out. Is that pretty accurate there, Wyatt?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's, the real success of projects like ours, and, to point to other ones like Spark or Ethereum, is just having that network effect of, having so much power in a tool that makes something that was seemingly really difficult, much, much easier now. It just opens up a world of possibilities, and just enabling new creative projects is kind of like the core to how all of us will, grow our various parts of enterprise or whatever we're doing, in our different projects. But yeah, I mean, we're launching a bunch of projects too. So yeah, we're just going to keep adding to the whole ecosystem, and watch it grow.
Yeah, I've personally got 2 moonlighting projects I'm working on that align with Hypergraph that are going to utilize the technology, because why not? We got this dope protocol we're working with. So heck yeah. All right. So moving to the next question. This one is for me. Any chance of Benjamin talking a little bit more about real-time proof of compliance, something he mentioned in a short vid a few weeks ago? It's in the tax audit space, or is it possible to ask this question on this? Okay, great. So, one thing I want to explain about real-time proof of compliance, and we've been using this term auditability, and the tax compliance space is probably the most ripe for something like this, maybe besides telco, where there's tons of transactions taking place that all need to be rectified, and there needs to be some form of fidelity about the truth of those transactions. And the amount of fraud that goes on in this world around taxes is insurmountable. I mean, it's crazy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not so much motivated about trying to be the man and saying, hey, you need to pay your taxes. We got a tool that will ensure it. But rather, I'm one of those guys that wants to know where his taxes are going, down to the penny. I want to know what I'm paying for and why. And right now, there is technologies like Constellation that will allow for this to take place. But we have to create that connective tissue of the disciplines and get into those systems to start to surface the possibility around what can be done with this stuff. So we've been using the term auditing, which I really want to I hate that term, and I'm going to explain why. Auditability is the way to be able to find out what's going on from the beginning. Like, hey, we want to know that. It's kind of like when a murder happens somewhere and it's 3 weeks later, they're trying to figure it out. They want to audit as much information from what happened in the moment during that murder to figure out what's going on. That's the auditability of something. But that doesn't necessarily make sense, because auditing is a lagging indicator represented by static data. So let that sink in. So you're basically pulling something out and bridging it to try to figure out if something made sense off of a sample. And that's kind of a piss poor way to go about understanding full situational awareness of what's going on with your data pipeline. We're moving into more alerting. We're just using this auditing terminology and nomenclature to help bridge that gap and wrap people's mind around the old paradigm and the new possibility. We're now, instead of us auditing a sample to see, hey, this data, let's take a piece out. Does it look funky? Okay, something's wrong. We have to look at all of it now. Instead, it's actually combing all the data as it comes through. And we're only doing alerting now, which is a leading indicator represented by real-time dynamic data, right? So that way, we're not having to find out if they're doing the right thing. We're only seeing those anomalies. So we're really trying to surface those anomalies, and auditing is the search for honest representation, where alerting really only surfaces corruption. Hopefully that makes sense. So my point being is, when we say real-time proof of compliance, there's a few blockchain kind of essences in there. Real time being the ability to take big data pipelines and cryptographically notarize and understand that data as it comes online, which really is hard right now because processing data in bulk is inefficient, costly, it's not secure. And so a lot of folks don't do it. That's why they just store it, they archive it, and then they audit it to see if something funky happened. It's a crap model. But so you have real time, you have proof meaning that we are able to notarize it as it comes through, and then compliance. What are the measures they have to hit from a regulation standpoint that we make sure that are insured from the source? And being able to do that from a streaming perspective changes the game in so many different worlds when it comes to those compliance measures. So this is not specific to tax. I'm going to give more explanations on what this means in 2021 because we have a few different use cases we're chasing right now that really bring out some of those elements from a real-time perspective. So hopefully I answered that one there. This one's for Wyatt. This gentleman
Benjamin, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. One of our copywriters, John Ryan, would like to ask a question and kind of expand on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you the floor, John.
Hey, Benjamin, how are things? I was just wondering, I was the one who asked that question there, just about real-time use of compliance. I was just wondering one thing. I know you can't talk about everything, obviously, with NDAs, and you've got to talk about other stuff. I know a little bit on it, and one of the things, and I've spoken to a few people, they mentioned with real-time proof of compliance in the tax auditing sector, it applies a lot to when people are looking for refunds. Can you elaborate on whether the data will be used specifically for that? And also, just if it is used for that, would that have implications on potentially people who own crypto paying tax, making it easier for them to pay tax on their crypto earnings? And if possible, is that something the Hypergraph is looking into in terms of, because it can be awkward sometimes doing that. Is that something that you're looking at, or is that just a potential segue? I appreciate you have NDAs, you can't do any more than that. Just when I said tax auditing, it was just something you had mentioned on a video, which immediately caught my mind. And I just did a bit of research on it. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate anything on it, even though—
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry about hopping in. Thanks very much.
No,
Big fan,
don't
by the way.
apologize. Don't apologize, John. Appreciate bringing some heat, buddy. And thanks for the question. And the good news is there's nothing I can't talk about here, since this is all more on the practice side of things. But when we submit taxes as an individual to the government, and there's a lot of layers here when you're talking about the taxation, because you have global, you have national, you have state, you have local. I mean, there's a lot of layers. You're on a plane that lands in Spain, but your origin is the United States. There's taxes that are involved based off of who's going where against the country. So it gets complicated. But to make it very practical, when I submit my taxes at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, you know, they then look at it, and I'm open to be audited within a 7-year window. And that's why I'm sure your tax people have said, keep your receipts for a 7-year window. And that's because they're only looking at a roll-up, and they're looking at anything that might seem over an aggregation that may seem fishy or funky. And so then they say, hey, Benjamin Diggles, you're getting audited. So then they request all of that detailed information. They comb through it, and all of that is extremely cumbersome and you know, resource intensive. Imagine though, if all of that data and the taxes down to the smallest piece was all being viewed in real time. So that way, all of our taxes are being compliant at any given point. So that's the big difference. You got to think about the archiving versus the detail. And that's when we talk about smart contracts versus state channels. Smart contracts can cryptographically secure a ledger balance, but the level of depth that a state channel brings is you can cryptographically secure and notarize the contents within that ledger balance. So that means the details of the receipt. So this is less about enabling a consumer around a refund or bettering their experience, and more holding accountability to these corporations that may be doing nefarious activities and keeping it, moving it into shell corporations, doing all this stuff to skirt having to.
Do you mind if I ask something very quickly? If you are saying that, and it's more for obviously big companies, does that mean that it's more, I suppose you hear the term so much, but is it more federal, like IRS and people like that, who will be using that to investigate potential tax fraud and things like that? Or is this something the likes of PwC and Deloitte and stuff would be using for their clients and things like that? Can you shed any light on that, or do NDAs prevent you from talking about that sort of stuff?
No, I mean, so I'll tell you right now, there's a company that we've been talking with. They're one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies and CPG companies. So I'm not going to say their name, but you can pretty much figure it out. Let's just say they make Q-tips and stuff like that. But they have so many taxes and regulations they have to abide by, and it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Anything that can speed up efficiencies is going to save them millions of dollars daily, like daily. And so those are the targets. And then the groups that manage those groups are like the PwCs of the world that have to work with them on the practices in which they do that workflow and connecting the appropriate systems to get the most out of it. But us coming in, we can cut some of those efficiencies up to 80 to 90%. So that's why they're attractive. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
That's great. I'm from Ireland, so we know a lot about white collar crime. So it's much appreciated what you're doing. So, thanks very much. Man. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Sweet. All right, I'm going to move over to another question from Wyatt because I'm starting to hate my own voice here. Wyatt, I just listened to a bit of the Hypergraph Hour from last week explaining the difference between smart contracts of ETH and state channels of Hypergraph. Sounds like state channel solution is quite similar to smart contract solution of IOTA, like oracleization and consensus off-chain with a ledger update afterwards on-chain. Am I correct?
So the only nuance here is that unlike IOTA is just in the business of putting data on chain and calling that an oracle. A real oracle is something that's able to reason about some internal state and make a decision about it, hopefully correctly. And so that requires incorporating like external data into your, consensus protocol. So what differs from us and IOTA is that we actually perform consensus on the state of your data, on the state of some type of a system, as opposed to just putting it on chain. And thus, in terms of a smart contract, you can put logic associated to it to react to certain state changes. So it acts autonomously.
Sweet. Thanks, buddy. All right, let's see here. We got more. I mean, this one's a tough one, but Wyatt, I'd love to know your thoughts. Is DAG interested in building DAOs with the help of the DoD, which can aid resistance groups in Iran, for instance? Facebook already helped these resistant groups organize, imagine, and secure DOA and bring to the table. I don't know if that's even a question. I don't know how to answer that. Do you have anything to say on that one, Wyatt?
No, I actually do. I think it's kind of interesting. So like in terms of a DAO, the original implementation of a DAO was like ruled illegal and like, just at least the way in which it handled funds. So I think that anything similar to this in the future would be a little bit different in several ways. So I hesitate to call it a DAO because it's not an object. It's like, an autonomous protocol. Call it a DApp. But now this isn't what we would be. I really don't think we're doing that with the DoD, or unfortunately, I don't know if Iran specifically is my fight, but I do think that in general, this type of technology is going to basically provide a security for everyone, whether it be intelligence agency, these governments in Iran, these whomever's running them themselves, but also the individual citizens, in order to kind of activate and enable them to have control over their interactions with society and the infrastructure around them, either through encryption or secure communications. So I could get into that in a little bit. I would say though that there is a sort of something similar to ZK snarks that I've been cooking up for one of our two state channels we're launching next year, Star, which is going to be our governance one. And so, if you follow the development on that, I think you'll see what I mean in terms of self-orchestration of, actors, node operators, and sort of the, I guess you could say, autonomy of, a decentralized network.
Sweet. All right, this one looks like it's for me. Since Konami is approaching the space industry through Seraphim Capital, will the partnership with Constellation also include joint efforts and shared opportunities for the space industry besides the efforts of the DoD? And the answer is a resounding yes, yes, yes. We are with Konami, we're going after joint opportunities both in the commercial and federal space. Naturally, we are trending faster in federal because we both have been flagged as very promising distributed technologies to help with that end-to-end secure data transportation from creation to storage. And that's very meaningful, thinking about the security of data that could be sitting on a thumb drive, that could be top secret. They want to know who touched it, when they touched it, and so forth. And as I said in my announcement of Space ISAC, we don't handle storage, and that's why you're going to see strategic partnerships in our ecosystem that handle different pieces of the business that we just don't touch. But that said, we're a crucial mission critical capability. Let that sink in. We're mission critical, meaning that a lot of these different projects and solutions, in order for them to go into production, they have to hit a certain level of security that they can only get at scale using a solution like Constellation. I'm sure they could cobble a bunch of, legacy solutions together, but nothing quite like a distributed network like Hypergraph. And that's why those folks in the federal space are continually bringing us into new opportunities. That said, the tax regulation thing that I keep talking about, that's something that we're working on with Konami. And we'll talk more about what that looks like in practice. And I touched on that a little bit on the Space ISAC announcement from the retail taxes piece. So if you don't remember that, go back and check it out. But yes, we're doing a lot with these folks in both in the commercial and federal space. So that answers that. Question is, does the Constellation team believe the recent ruling by the CFTC does not apply to Lattice, or that they can circumvent that, unlike Coinbase, who had to shut down its futures? And so for those that don't know, the CFTC is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. This might be a better question for the next happy hour with Ben and Matthias, but I will say from my perspective, and I want to be very candid, that I am more focused on Constellation projects right now than I am Lattice. I'm supporting that effort, but I'm a Constellation focused right now. And I was very cautious of us going into this as a company because I wanted to make sure we were doing it the right way. And that's exactly how Ben and Matthias have conducted the entire thing: buttoned up, clean, and the right way of going about it. We're a high integrity and a transparent team. And so if there is anything that has incongruencies, we will work hard to fix those and do it the right way. So we are not a shady project, but I don't know, Wyatt, if you have any opinions on this that you want to share, if we should punt this one to next week.
So honestly, I was kind of trailed off. What was the question again?
Does the Constellation team believe the recent ruling by the CFTC does not apply to Lattice, or that they need to circumvent that, unlike Coinbase, who had to shut down its futures platform? Probably should move this one to next.
Yeah, let's move to next week. I just need to read what it actually is.
Yeah, that's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission made, and you may not be up to speed on the recent ruling, but we all have strong opinions, but we'll keep those opinions to the side and focus on Constellation technology here. So I know that we only have about 8 minutes left. I think that I've actually gotten through the majority of the questions that I had written down. And so Elise, might be good to open it up if anybody wants to ask any questions, but before we adjourn or slap them into chat, we'd be more than happy to answer those.
Yeah, is there anybody else that wants to come on and have any comments or any more questions that we didn't address? If you don't have anything, we can say in the chat. Headroom just said, Wyatt, what is your dream use cases to build on Hypergraph? Oh, we got to go into his dreams. This could be terrifying for all of us.
So Wyatt, did you get that question?
No,
What's your Dream
Yeah.
use case to build on Hypergraph.
No, so this is actually a project that's been floating around and is maybe I'll drop a little Easter egg for next year. So one of the really big, huge accomplishments of this paper that's coming out is that I was able to create at least the foundations for a programming language similar to like, Solidity, but for state channels, something that could act like a DSL or even like a rich language, for microservices that incorporates some type of a security protocol as like a, native operation. And so what's really cool about that is that in the process of finding out, how to sort of create, what you'll see is a global interpreter, similar to how Ethereum wanted to be the, global computer. This would be like an interpreter for, any, decentralized system of microservices, such that, users can input operations or a query, and then the output can be spit back. This leads us to, the question, what are we doing about machine data? How do we actually understand the global situational awareness of our physical infrastructure? We're very concerned about hypertext data and what serves up the internet. But in general, like what log and sort of fidelity do we have to the actual, bare metal that's serving up our reality? And so this kind of leads into, this project that I'm sort of spearheading. It's my baby called Reality. And it's meant to be something like, a general, search tool, but for machine data, across the entire internet and any subnet that connects. So, I think the TLDR here is that from product standpoint, the goal is to provide something like a Google for individuals who are concerned about the physical state of some type of the system, whether it's their server infrastructure, whether it's some fleet of aircrafts. This is a way in which you can interact with that and, actually communicate with the system in order to understand its state. And so, the real sort of aha here is that I want to create a global context for like a reality that all, people hopefully will share, basically like a giant knowledge graph of events that are notarized. Events that are processed through all of our interconnected infrastructure. And we can use that in order to, come to consensus on the state of, a reality. That's kind of what the whole thing really was kind of meant to be from my moonshot idea. So, what do
Awesome.
you believe?
It's awesome, buddy. Heck yeah. I found one more question here. Is Microsoft Azure Orbital a target for Constellation satellite? So those that don't know what Azure Orbital is, it's a satellite ground station and scheduling service connected to Azure for fast downlinking of data. I mean, so yeah, I mean, of course, like, our goal is to be an application solution much like theirs that's easily deployable. So like, hey, great, you want that downlinking of data? Great. Do you want to ensure that it's notarized and secure? Then you're going to want to deploy our application on top of it or our solution on top of it. But we would probably integrate with them anyway. So any of these deployment tools, you're going to see us getting in line with in the best way possible. All right, we got 4 more minutes. I'm going to ask one more for Wyatt, which I think is a great question. Can you tell us how scalable DAG is right now, and if state channels increase this?
Yeah, 100%. So right now, everything was built in sort of like the first order approximation for how, we can actually get, all of the different nodes within the Hypergraph network to cooperate together. And one of the benefits of that being scalability. And so that's at the actual sort of full nth order solution is, inside of a project called Tessellation that's on our GitHub page. So that's actually the core project I've been working on for about 6 months. And so everybody's starting to work on that now too. And that is how we're building our interface to state channels. And so one of the demos that I'll spoil is to, demonstrate our ability to stream consensus, using just like a buffered stream into multiple consensus processes happening at the same time. And so we'll be able to show, based upon the amount of resources that a certain node or a server has and the configuration of parallelism that's set, that, the more processes that are, it's possible to have on a certain node, and thus to increase the parallelism factor of, actually performing consensus on data. So the real sort of aha here is to create this function for the amount of resources that a node has, or that, the collection of nodes have. And then to find an upper bound on the number of processes, and thus the number of transactions that can happen for the total cluster. And so this is what's really beautiful about this, is that we can already see right now, just in what we're building, that it's configurable. So like, if you want your network to be faster, you can just get a bigger server or more nodes in order to increase the number of these processes that are happening. And it's really magical, because we are able to decouple the convergence of the network from the actual L1 consensus process into what we call base layer 0. And you'll hear me say that a lot more in the future. Base layer 0 is meant to be like the base layer of base layers that actually provides a context for cross-chain liquidity.
Sweet. All right. So we're going to wrap up. There's some questions around token price, and there's questions around liquidity and exchanges, all things that I would like you guys to ask next week with Ben and Matthias. To remind everyone, this is focused on Hypergraph, the technology, and the business side of things. So just punting those off a little bit, but appreciate everybody joining the call. I'm not sure if Elise, you want to say anything to take us home?
Take me out to the ball game, and we shot, we scored, we hit home runs, and we will continue to do it again and again every single week. So I've answered tons of questions in private messaging. Everybody seems very excited. There's a lot more questions coming in. I wanted to tell everybody happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. Please celebrate it safe and with the ones that you love. And remember that gratitude and kindness gets us very far in life. And then also, I'll be talking with Stardust Collective, but I think Constellation and Lattice and Stardust is taking off 2 weeks, possibly. I will make a professional announcement in our communities, but it was mentioned several people would like to take off for the holiday. So we may reconvene the first of the year. We look forward to that. I dropped the photographs so everybody can have a really great postcard to send their grandmas. My grandmother is really glad that she's not around anymore, so she doesn't get that. So you guys all have a wonderful, wonderful time. Thank you, Stardust, for everything. And we'll see you guys in, I believe, 2 weeks. So thank you.
Thanks, Elise. You're a rock star. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.